If there was ever a chapter in this book that calls for self-awareness and challenging your own thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors, it's this one. Like how the author states in the intro to this chapter, uncertainty feels like self-awareness to me. Acknowledging uncertainty is a function of grounded confidence, and it feels like humility to me. Welcome to Brushstrokes and Bookmarks, a series that combines books, painting, and mental health and therapy all into one. We go through a therapy, social work, self-help book together, chapter by chapter, discussing ideas, asking questions, sharing resources, and learning together while painting together. If you're not into painting, take 30 minutes to listen while you do one of your own hobbies, or maybe it's something to play on your drive somewhere. Whatever you decide to do, I'm glad to have you here. It's been a little while since my last post in this book, but I am excited to keep it going right now. Today we'll be going over Chapter 5, Places We Go When Things Aren't What They Seem. If you want to go grab stuff to paint along or start another hobby or grab a notebook, feel free to pause. And of course, in book club fashion, please comment and discuss what things stood out to you, your thoughts on the chapter, and any relevant links and resources that you would like to share. I do want to emphasize that when it comes to mental health and therapy, it is highly individualized. I come from a very person-centered approach where, although there's a lot of research and evidence that comes along with therapeutic interventions, an individual's identity, influences, values, environment, and goals require personalized approaches that suit their circumstances. So with these videos and content, I want to give a disclaimer to make it absolutely clear that this is not me as a therapist or social worker telling you what to do or giving official therapeutic advice for you and your situation. I want to share ideas, concepts, and skills to think about. Hopefully introduce something new into your world. Not that I'll be sharing anything revolutionary or groundbreaking here, but you never know what barriers prevent people from accessing help, and shouldn't assume someone's basis of knowledge. And I really want to help in removing and lowering barriers that restrict access to resources and help that can aid human well-being. I highly encourage going to a therapist or licensed professional for advice and treatment. This is not a replacement or equivalent for that professional help. Here's what I'm using today. If you want to follow along to the painting, these paintings follow the same structure every week. I want to create more cohesive pieces per book we read, and this is the idea we are going for in this book. But please feel free to use other colors or paint something completely different if you want to. But for this chapter, I am going to be painting some roses. Red is going to be the base color today, of course. This chapter is all about conflicting emotions, thoughts, behaviors, holding space for different things at the same time, and finding growth in being challenged. So I think roses fit perfectly. The beautiful petals, along with the thorns in the stem, symbolize to me the beauty of having two seemingly opposite things coexist. And I think the flower really highlights specifically the sections we'll get into of bittersweetness, cognitive dissonance, and paradox. This chapter is all about the kinds of emotions that can arise from the experience of having things not be so clear to us. Amusement, bittersweetness, nostalgia, cognitive dissonance, paradox, irony, and sarcasm. The definition in the book for amusement is given as pleasurable, relaxed excitation. It follows two themes: one, an awareness of incongruity, and two, when we feel amusement, we feel playful with those around us. And what makes it different is that it also requires a sense of unexpectedness with the playfulness. This emotion relies to an extent on sense of humor. So when it comes to utilizing amusement as a way to connect with others, there then has to be, to an extent, a sense of compatibility and sense of humor, or at least a sense of awareness of the other person's sense of humor. I also like how there has been some research indicating that amusement can be used to replenish depleted cognitive resources. In other words, amusement can be a tool to recharge from being burnt out. A term that this can be associated with is what is called active rest. Active rest is being proactive in how you choose to recharge. It's not just doing nothing, but it is being intentional and mindful in what you choose to be and what you choose to do to become replenished again. So if, for example, you're finding yourself doing nothing and taking naps in order to avoid your responsibilities or to escape reality, that's not active rest. But if you're taking naps because they bring you true recovery and energy, then that can be active rest. If you're watching a TV show and find yourself constantly doing that in order to procrastinate and maybe even feel guilty afterwards, then that's not active rest. Active rest is not doing nothing, it's doing things that bring you joy, recovery, and energy that brings you back. It's resting in a way where you don't feel guilty afterwards for spending that time caring for yourself, and you gain something healthy from it. And that gain can be anything like healthy sleep, positive social connection with others, practice in a skill or hobby, or some type of learning. So active rest can include anything that brings you energy and pleasure, like spending time with people who lift you up, practicing a skill, learning something new, enjoying a hobby or whatever. And yes, it can include naps and watching shows or movies as long as it actually feels restful during and afterwards without the guilt. And yes, I do keep bringing up naps because I may be trying to convince myself that all the naps I take are for my own good. But I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking very generally, and it can be really tough to practice this and often is a very privileged thing to be able to do. There's plenty of people who really don't have the time or resources to take the break and the rest like that. There's circumstances that limit this tool for sure. I don't want to overlook that. So I'm definitely saying all this in a place of generality and situations where it can't be done. And there can often be a lot more work that goes into getting true active rest as well, even if you do have the time. Often people who feel pressure to always be productive can struggle a lot with this because resting can feel like a waste of time to them, or feel guilty or selfish for it, or accomplishing this active rest becomes just another to-do list item. What I really like about active rest is that it challenges those things. It's a form of self-care that requires you to be okay with just being you, with just existing in the things you like to do, without the goal of being productive. In fact, there's no scorecard for it. There's no winning or losing. There's no competition. There are no expectations. It's just about you fueling yourself again. And now that I've gone far off from the original topic of amusement, I'll tie it back just by saying that being able to use amusement to rest, find joy, lightheartedness, and humor in between or during the tough times, the jobs, and the burnout is super important for preserving mental health and your energy and your ability to really show up for the things that matter. Because that's one of the actual goals, right? To genuinely and authentically show up for the moments and people that matter, and to do the things that bring you closer to your core values. Moving on to the next section, bittersweetness. This is a pretty common term that I think most everyone knows, and is one that I think is one of the most common expressions of cognitive dissonance, which we'll get to later, but it's definitely one that feels very touching and moving to me. It's all about having a sort of sadness of letting go and happiness or gratefulness for what's coming or what has happened. This makes me think of the expression, waiting for the other shoe to drop. For me personally, I find a lot of bittersweet moments when I am currently experiencing a happy and joyful moment or experience, and I'm feeling almost so happy that I immediately get sad or anxious about it going away or possibly going away. Almost like I'm mourning the moment and experience before I even need to, or before it even happens, because it might not even happen. But obviously there are a lot of ways to experience bittersweetness. Commonly it involves life transitions, big or small. like graduations, moving, entering or exiting a relationship, birth, death, retirement, and so on, but it can definitely be experienced on smaller scales as well. So I'd love to hear any examples that you might think of or have gone through or are going through where you felt that bittersweetness. And sometimes I think bittersweetness can be experienced in nostalgia, but it isn't all the time. There can be a great overlap just because nostalgia involves some part of you wanting to go back or experience that memory again, or want to go back to a certain moment or experience. A moment or experience how we remember it, right? Because our memory isn't always reliable. It's important to remember that the feeling of nostalgia relies on how we experienced and remember that moment. And that can also contribute to how nostalgia can become a double-edged sword, or how the book states a tool for disconnection or connection. Because if we're trying to cultivate connection through nostalgia, or navigate relationships with a great influence of nostalgia, then there can often be a lot of disappointment. Because again, nostalgia is based off of your own biased experience and memory, and in that way can be dismissing of the other person if you aren't careful. That's also where the distinction between having nostalgia and rumination or reflection is really important. So I guess in a way I will backtrack what I just said. What I should have said is that if we're trying to cultivate connection through ruminated nostalgia, or navigate relationships with a great influence of ruminated nostalgia, there can be a lot of disappointment. Because rumination is, simply put, a negative thought spiral that you can't get out of and often get into and can often reference. And reflection is using nostalgia to grow and move forward. So reflective nostalgia can be more useful and healthy to use towards connection and learning and open-mindedness to others' experiences. In this nostalgia topic, I also wanted to touch really quick on being wary of how nostalgia can sometimes become an avoidance coping mechanism, where getting stuck in it can become a tool to escape and avoid. It's good to remember and appreciate and grow from the past, which is more of the reflective piece of it that I was talking about earlier. But you can't live in the past. And that's kind of more what the rumination is. And sometimes we can romanticize how things used to be, whether that's periods of time as a society, personal experiences, or in relationships. But don't let that keep you from your reality or limit how you experience your reality and present. The engine that drives self-justification, the energy that produces the need to justify our actions and decisions, especially the wrong ones, is the unpleasant feeling that's called cognitive dissonance. This is a state of tension that occurs when a person holds two cognitions, ideas, attitudes, beliefs, opinions, that are psychologically inconsistent with each other, such as smoking is a dumb thing to do because it could kill me, and I smoke 2 packs a day. Dissonance produces mental discomfort that ranges from minor pangs to deep anguish. People don't rest easy until they find a way to reduce it. Dissonance is disquieting because to hold two ideas that contradict each other is to flirt with absurdity. And as Albert Camus observed, we are creatures who spend our lives trying to convince ourselves that our existence is not absurd. At the heart of it, this theory is about how people strive to make sense out of contradictory ideas and lead lives that are, at least in their own minds, consistent and meaningful. So cognitive dissonance kind of pushes for a change because of a new imbalance of two opposing beliefs, thoughts, or actions. Or it can occur when you are given new information and experiences that challenge your current beliefs and thoughts. The real challenge is being able to hold space for that, to allow yourself to, as it says later in the section, rethink and unlearn. So it's being able to let that friction and that discomfort challenge you and then being able to do something with it afterwards. It is, as the author says, to choose courage and curiosity over comfort. Because as we've hopefully learned by now, comfort isn't as good of a teacher as discomfort. Some examples of what happens when we choose comfort over courage in this sense is avoidance, delegitimizing, discrediting, dismissing, or belittling. An example of cognitive dissonance can be, like in the book, someone who smokes cigarettes even though they know it's bad for them. And that magnitude for dissonance increases if that individual values health more. Something that can be helpful for these kinds of dissonance is some value work. Something that I like working on and discussing with my own therapy clients is their values. The personal and core values that are most important to them. These values can be anything. They can be people and relationships, love, time, education, career, money, travel, creativity, humor, health, a certain hobby, honesty, intelligence, kindness, passions, and the list goes on. In fact, Brené Brown, the author, has an example list of values that you could reference if you wanted to create your own list of values. Or you can just Google more because there are a lot, and it just depends on what's important to you. What you can do is create a list of 5 to 10 values, or more or less, that feel most important to you. And then feel free to rank them as well if you want, but you don't have to. Then reflect on why those are your values. Why did you choose them? Then on a scale of 0 to 10, give yourself a number on how closely you are living to that value. 0 being not at all, and 10 being the most you possibly could. After that, I want you to ask yourself and reflect on each of those values and the scores you gave them. And then go through each one again and ask yourself, why am I at that number right now? Is there anything that's keeping me there? And then I want you to reflect on what you think needs to happen in order for you to go up just one number. Notice I didn't say how to get yourself all the way up to a 10. But for example, if you're at a 5 out of 10 for a value, ask yourself, what is keeping me at a 5 instead of a 6? And what needs to happen to go from a 5 to a 6? Because being a 10 and being perfect isn't the goal, right? It's learning how to lay down the groundwork and how to have continual growth little by little, and being able to give yourself grace in the growing process and work your way up, not to be perfect. Because, spoiler alert, you're never going to have all 10s across the board in all of those values. Life has ups and downs and ebbs and flows, so it's about being able to do the work to keep pushing through and leading with curiosity, having the skill to work your way up one point at a time, even if you get knocked down again and again. And it'll be so much more valuable than trying to always just be a 10. Tying this back, often cognitive dissonance and friction and discomfort that occurs can happen because there's some sort of violation to a value. And now there needs to be exploration, reflection, curiosity, and vulnerability in figuring out how to hold space for that and how to move forward. Vulnerability is the first thing we look for in other people and the last thing we want to show them about ourselves. This is a wonderful example of paradox from the author. Now, paradox can seem very similar to cognitive dissonance, but with paradox, it's about challenging yourself to hold the legitimacy of two truths. Similarly, though, it challenges our current thoughts and beliefs. The main difference is that we are trying to let the two related thoughts or beliefs coexist. I think that this is a very important skill to have because of how much it submits your thoughts and beliefs to vulnerability, and that it can increase your open-mindedness and empathy. Because when you are able to hold multiple truths to be true or possible, then you are able to allow space for others to hold their truths. And not only that, but it can allow for a greater and deeper expansion into creativity and humility. Now, with these last sections on irony and sarcasm, I'll be totally honest, but I often confuse the two or use them interchangeably, even though that is definitely wrong. but I don't think I'm alone in that, so see if we can find the difference. One that I found is that sarcasm is a type of irony, and that it usually has a tendency to tease in its intentions. Something I really like that was stated in the book is how comprehension indicates ability to infer other people's mental states. And I really like this because it requires an ability to be empathetic to an extent, because empathy is all about being able to feel with another person, which takes that comprehension. Now, both can be easily misunderstood. I'm sure most of us have received or sent a text message or email that contained sarcasm and it was interpreted outside of how it was intended. I know I definitely have. In this way, this is your warning of using either sarcasm or irony over messaging. Sometimes it can be effective if you are close with that other person and really understand each other's humor, but it can also be super confusing and problematic if you don't. I do think that irony and sarcasm can be used as communication tools, and often are, where they both are almost used as tools to invite people in to shared humor and create connection. Sometimes people say that if they aren't using their sarcasm and humor with another person, they probably aren't that close with them. And if they are using sarcasm and humor, then that's probably a good sign that they are trying to connect with that person, or that they have already made a connection with that person, that the tool is now enhancing their communication and closeness. Another thing that I thought of is how irony and sarcasm can be connected to wit and banter, because in these same ways that I've talked about already, it can also increase the flow and ease of a conversation as well. But again, it depends on the people and situation, which I feel like is something that I say with a lot of different things in these videos and a lot of different things as a therapist, honestly. Because they do have the power to create the opposite effects and become tools that are weaponized to make others feel belittled, talked down to, or left out if used in that way. Something else that I would flag in using sarcasm and irony is using it to talk about hard things. Although some humor relief can be helpful in the repair phase of the end of an argument or a hard conversation, using sarcasm, irony, or humor too much or at the wrong time can cause more hurt than good. Also, using that humor to cope or talk about your own hard things, either in self-reflection or to another person, can become a tool for avoidance if it's used as a crutch or way to escape feeling vulnerability, especially if it's become a pattern. Again, not saying that humor is bad. It's a wonderful tool to connect with other people, but it's just something to be aware of to see if it's something that you rely on to deal with hard conversations with others or yourself. So, what are the takeaways here? One suggestion that I have is to try and find ways to increase your active rest and ask yourself some questions like, does my rest now bring me guilt afterwards? Do I find enjoyment in what I do now? What do I get out of what I do now to recover? What does bring me energy, and how can I do more of that? Another point of reflection can be in regards to that cognitive dissonance. If you find yourself feeling imbalance or in friction or in a low point, one thing I would say or suggest could be to do the value work and ask yourself, what value did this thought, behavior, or information violate that is making me feel so off or down or confused? And how can I move to be closer to that value again? And And something else to consider in your self-reflection is the last question that is asked in the chapter. Are you dressing something up in humor that actually requires clarity and honesty? And I'll add to that even more. Are you able to be real and vulnerable with yourself about the things that are hard for you? Now, I know I said self-reflection way too much in this video, but I'd rather overemphasize it than not highlight it enough, because it is so crucial to increasing self-awareness and growth in a healthy direction. And with that, no self-reflection, no self-awareness, no growth, then means less of an ability to show up for others in a way that they deserve. And of course, less of an ability to show up for yourself in a way that you deserve. So show up for others, show up for yourself, and make those changes, practice those tools, and do the work. You can do it. This is our painting results. Speaking of all that advice and stuff that I said, I should really take my own advice. Because in all honesty, I tried to do this painting more than once and just kept hitting this wall and felt so unmotivated to finish it. And it's a big reason on why there's been a pretty big break from posting videos from this one and the one before. I just could not get happy with what I was painting. But the reason I share this here now is because I really had to take my own advice and remember that it doesn't have to be perfect every time, and to keep pushing through, even when you don't want to or feel like you got hit down. And although this painting was unnecessarily rough for me, I do now like that it symbolized this moment for me personally in this series. But anyways, this is how it turned out. I was nervous about doing roses because they're so just iconic and one of the most classic flowers. But I think that they represent the beauty of growth from being challenged, and the poke you can feel from being challenged as well. A simple way to symbolize the good and the bad, if you will. But leave a comment, question, or start a discussion below. Let me know what stood out to you and what thoughts, tools, quotes, or whatever popped up for you. Whether it's about the book, the art, or other resources you have. And of course, I'll have the links to techniques and concepts and everything that I mentioned today. And if you have any questions or want any further videos or talks about some of the things that I talked about, let me know. Last announcement, more of a reminder really, that I have another project that's called Brushstrokes and Breakthroughs. It's a monthly art mail club. Similar name to this book club series because once a month I'll be mailing a small art print from this book club series, like just these ones that we paint here, along with a sticker, a bookmark, and a letter that is mental health, therapy, and social work related. So if you want an art print of these paintings from the series, they will be exclusively sold to those monthly mail club members, so that I can give you guys a discounted price on art and also use a portion of that money to give it away to better causes. Because a portion of the proceeds from it will go towards charity to keep passing it forward. Sign-ups will be through Patreon and are currently open. The link is in the description and in my bio, or you can go to Patreon and search Tainui Style. That's where you can also have a say as to where to donate the proceeds from Mail Club. And even if you don't join the Mail Club subscription option, you can still join the Patreon page for free. And hopefully I will be able to have the option for you to get past Mail Club months as well if you miss them or want more of one, or just want some particular ones. But thanks for hanging out. Next time we're gonna go into chapter 6, places we go when we're hurting. Anguish, hopelessness, despair, sadness, grief. Just as a heads up, it can be a pretty heavy chapter, So make sure that you are in a good, safe space to read the chapter and watch the next video. See you then.